On August 23rd, 1974, a community was forever shaken by the loss of a little girl who should have had her whole life ahead of her. Jaylene Dawn Banker was only 10 years old, a child still filled with wonder, laughter, and dreams of youth. She was the kind of innocence that makes childhood so precious, a curiosity about the world, a smile that could light up a room, a spirit that made her family proud every single day. That summer, she was just like any other kid at the fair in Rollins, enjoying the magic of carnival rides, the smell of cotton candy in the air, and the joy of being surrounded by people, colors, and sounds that felt larger than life. For a child, the fair is a world of wonder. For Jaylene, it should have been a memory of happiness. Instead, it became the place where her life was stolen. She was abducted from the very heart of her hometown, taken from safety, from family, from love. In the days that followed, her family and her community lived through every parent's worst nightmare: the uncertainty, the desperate searching, and the fear of what might have happened. Eventually, the truth came in the cruelest form. Jaylene's body was found near Sinclair, Wyoming. She had been murdered, her life taken before it ever truly began. Jaylene was not just a victim. She was a beloved daughter, a young girl whose whole life lay before her, a future that might have been filled with school dances, graduations, careers, friendships, and a family of her own. All of that possibility and all of that promise was stolen in an instant of violence. And yet, what remains is her memory, carried in the hearts of those who loved her and in the voices of those who refused to let her story fade away. Even though it has been decades since that summer evening, the image of Jaylene remains vivid, a 10-year-old girl who deserves so much more. Remembering her is not just about revisiting tragedy. It is about restoring her humanity. It is about reminding the world that she was more than what was done to her. She was joy, she was love, and she was a child whose life still matters. On this anniversary of her death, we honor her by speaking her name, Jaylene Dawn Banker. We honor her by remembering the light that she carried, the childhood stolen from her, and the grief her family has endured ever since. And we honor her by refusing to allow her story to be reduced to silence. Today, we remember Jaylene. We hold space not only for the pain of her loss, but also for the beauty of who she was, a little girl with a heart full of love, whose story will always matter. Though she was taken way too soon, she will never, ever be forgotten. So let's pause here, holding Jaylene's memory close, not as just another name in the history of violence, but as a little girl who mattered, who was loved, and who will always be remembered. And with her story in our hearts, we now step forward into the work of remembrance and investigation, carrying her legacy with us as we seek truth and understanding. Highways stretch like arteries across America. Vast, open roads where silence hums beneath rubber and asphalt. We travel them to get away, to get closer, or to start over. But sometimes, people vanish on them, and no one sees a thing. This is the story of one such road, one car, one girl, and a journey that never reached its destination. March 25th, 1988, Lisa Marie Kimmell, just 18 years old, gets behind the wheel of her black Honda CRX. She's on a familiar stretch of road from Denver, Colorado, where she lives and works, up toward Cody, Wyoming, where her boyfriend waits. She never arrives. There are no dramatic tire marks, no broken taillights left behind, just absence, a growing one. By the time concerns bloom into dread, Lisa has already been missing for hours, and then days, then weeks. This was no joyride gone wrong, no teenage rebellion. Lisa Marie Kimmell was a bright, reliable young woman, working at Arby's, following in her mother's footsteps. A daughter who always came home with her mom, a friend who didn't just disappear without a trace. The case would become one of the most haunting disappearances of the late 1980s, a case that sprawled across state lines, that exposed the failures of interstate communication, and for nearly 15 years remained sealed in silence. In this episode, we're going back to where it all began. We'll take you into Lisa's life in Colorado, her routines, her hopes, her reasons for the trip. We'll map her journey northward, town by town, curve by curve, and we'll reconstruct the final hours before she vanished. We'll also examine the first phase of the investigation, how her family fought to make authorities care, how one missing young woman was quietly deprioritized, and how critical early clues were lost to time. We begin not with a body, but with a road, a young woman driving through the wide open West, and the question that would echo for decades: where did Lisa Marie Kimmell go, and who made her disappear? This is episode 1 of our multi-part investigation. So, Angela, how's it going?
It's going well. How are you?
I'm doing all right.
We're going to end it there. I'm doing all right.
Back in the saddle again. I'm still dealing with the craziness, and so I ask the listeners to continue to be patient and thank them for their patience. But all in all, I'm doing really good. The situation that I'm dealing with is going better than expected.
That's good.
But when you're talking about
I've been worried about
90-year-old patients, it's not a quick thing at all. So, but yeah, it's really going good.
I'm about ready for him to get up and whip your ass, though.
Yeah, well, I'm waiting for it. I keep encouraging him to. So, but there are some cases that stay with you because they're brutal, or because they're strange, or because they're unsolved. And then there's the ones that change you, that carve a path so deep into your memory that they shape who you become. And for me, Lisa's case was that one. I was 11 years old when she disappeared. I remember everything. I remember the news reports, the flyers, all of the stuff. And I remember not understanding how someone could just vanish like that. And then what happened to her, how that could happen. I mean, I said this before, but this was the case for sure that just cemented this true crime thing that's inside me. It comes back to this one.
Yeah. And we all know that question never left you.
No.
That's why you're still here.
It didn't. I mean, from my perspective, Lisa's case is why Dark Dialogue exists. This is where that seed was planted. Not just a curiosity about crime, but a calling, a need to understand how shit like this can happen. And, I'll never forget this case. I don't remember a whole lot about, that age, but this is just cemented into my memory.
Right. Lisa wasn't a stranger on a map. She was a daughter, a coworker, a young woman who should have made it to Cody, and her case, it matters.
This is Dark Dialogue, Rocky Mountain Reckoning, the series where we return to the crimes rooted deep in the dirt and the snow of the American West, the ones that never left the hearts of the people who lived through them.
We investigate the stories buried under snowfall, prairie dust, and decades of unanswered questions. The ones whispered through cattle fences, past broken barbed wire, and across wind-lashed highways.
Disappearance isn't always about getting lost. Sometimes someone's waiting.
I'm Angela.
And I'm John.
And in this episode, we look at the final day Lisa was seen, her life in Colorado, the roads she knew well, and the moment her absence became unbearable for those who loved her.
We're not pointing fingers at law enforcement. They worked with what they had, but time, distance, and silence, those things protect predators, and we're here to break that silence.
This is episode 1, Vanished on the Road to Cody.
And this is Dark Dialogue, Rocky Mountain Reckoning. The Yellowstone River moves slow in the spring, not lazy, just measured. Like it's been here a long time and has nothing left to prove. Just outside Billings, the cottonwoods lean into the water and the land flattens into the sky. This is where Lisa Marie Kimmell grew up. And if you ask the people who knew her back then, they'll tell you that she came into the world with her eyes wide open. There was always something certain about Lisa. Even as a kid, she had that spark, that combination of kindness and direction you don't often find in someone still learning how to drive. She didn't just grow up in Montana, she carried it with her. Big sky, big heart, big plans. This is where Lisa's story begins. Before the car, before the headlines, before the silence. So Lisa Marie Kimmell was born July 18th, 1969. And she was actually born in Covington in Tipton County, Tennessee. To her parents, Ronald, her dad, Ronald, who was stationed he was a U.S. Marine Corps. He was in the U.S. Marine Corps and was stationed there.
Hoorah.
Yep. And then her mother was Sheila Kimmell. And so they were, like I said, they were stationed in Covington, Tennessee, but they moved to Billings shortly after her birth. And she was the oldest of 3 daughters and had a younger brother named Ricky Lee Kimmell, who tragically, he died at age 3 in a tragic accident. So, yeah, so these poor parents buried 2 children.
Dang, I didn't know.
Yeah. And then her grandma on her dad's side is the one that named her Lisa Marie. And then...
Is it because of Presley?
It probably was. I don't really know that, but it probably was. But this grandmother is also the one that nicknamed her Lil Miss.
Oh.
So...
Grandma.
Yeah, because her grandma would say, "My little Miss Lisa Marie." So,
tugging at my heartstrings, John.
Yeah, that's a tough one. It is. But that'll come up throughout this case. I mean, we'll talk about it on every single episode. And if you research this case, you actually have better luck searching Lil Miss than you do Lisa Marie.
I discovered that. Yeah.
Because this is known as the Lil Miss murders. And, as we'll talk about, that comes because she carried that nickname her whole life. And then had it on her license plate. That was a license plate on her car, said Lil Miss.
She's carried it in death.
Yeah. So, it's pretty, I mean, it's a very touching sentiment to the whole story. And it really defined the case. So, like I said, the family moved to Billings, Montana shortly after Lisa was born. And then they stayed there.
So they're still there?
As far as I know, yes. And so they raised their children there. The family was close-knit. And like I said, they endured the loss of her younger brother, which, had to be unbelievably tragic for not just her parents, but for her siblings as well, for her and her siblings, like the kids, the parents. I mean, you lose a child, especially at age 3. I mean, it's just,
I can't imagine.
So she grew up in Billings, which is a town that we know quite well. And so I guess I should tell the listeners that while we typically start with location information, John completely dropped the ball and forgot to ask Angela to do that. So we will cover the location information in episode 2 of Lisa's case, which I don't think it's going to screw up the flow too bad at all, but the blame for that definitely falls on me.
Oh, come on.
And so, but Billings is a town
like you haven't had your hands full the last couple of weeks.
This is true. I have a bit on my mind, but Billings is a town that we're very familiar with. We live pretty close to it, and it's not our first foray into the area. We had Lori Bray, who was murdered in Laurel, Montana, but who also grew up in Billings and graduated high school in Billings. And so, it's kind of almost revisiting the area again. And Billings is an area that we will probably be back to again. I know that in season 2 of Rocky Mountain Reckoning, we will be in Billings a bit because there are a lot of cases that I'm looking into for season 2 that are
shadowing that we will physically be there.
Most likely.
Okay.
Yeah, most likely season 2 is going to have some on-site
dark dialogue
stuff.
Field trip.
Yep. But Lisa was known as being sweet, fun, outgoing, hardworking, dedicated, and as a hobby, she collected teddy bears, which I thought was kind of cool. And she was viewed as somebody that had a lot of promise. She attended and graduated from Billings Senior High School, made her class of 1987, which is another reason I think that this case hit me so hard is because I had a sister who was class of 88. Mm-hmm. And I just remember as a kid thinking like, that's my big sister's age. Like, how can that happen to somebody my big sister's age? It blew me away. And, her pictures of her my oldest sister who graduated in 80 but the two pictures, like you put them side by side and you can mistake one for the other. You know what I mean? They had that 80s hairdo and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And it's just, you see so many of those senior pictures of girls in the 80s and the hair, and they look so similar, and this was more of the earlier 80s style, not like the big tons of hairspray, but more late 70s, early 80s kind of hairstyle.
Farrah Fawcett type thing.
Yeah. I mean, if you look up Lisa Marie Kimmell, that picture, which is her graduation picture, is a pretty popular one that's out there. So, but she lived in Billings with her family up until she graduated. And then they had a bit of a odd situation. And we're going to get into that as far as with where mom worked and everything. So we'll discuss that in the next section because it becomes very, very important to the story. Because where mom worked ends up being where Lisa's going to work. And so, but I couldn't find it, and I didn't really, really dig into a lot of background on Lisa. And one of the big reasons for that is because her case has been covered so extensively that, first of all, it's out there. It's not hard to find out all the information about her. But number 2, because there's so much information on this case out there, we're already going to be doing multiple episodes on Lisa's story. And so I just didn't spend a lot of time on the whole background of, her childhood growing up and all of that kind of stuff.
Right. So, okay.
The Arby's off Havana Street wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, predictable, clean uniforms, plastic name tags, fryers that hissed every few minutes like they had something to say. It's where Lisa clocked in 5 days a week, showed up early, stayed late, got the orders right, smiled like the day wasn't wearing her down, because that's who Lisa was. Even when the work was thankless, she cared. And just a few miles away, her mother was working too, pulling long hours, juggling bills, trying to build a future. They came to Colorado together, and they lived close to each other, but not in the same place. Lisa was building a life, paycheck by paycheck, plan by plan. It wasn't flashy, but it was working. And for a while, just long enough to feel safe, Lisa believed everything was going according to plan. Lisa's mom worked for Arby's Corporation, and she held a role in it. She was had a senior management position. And at some point, that position was going to be based in Denver, Colorado. I couldn't confirm whether it was always that way or if it was a relatively new thing.
Okay.
But she had worked at Arby's for quite a while. She kind of worked up the ranks. She was a regional manager, then she was a district supervisor, then she moved into more senior management. And so she oversaw multiple Arby's locations, and which required her to travel to the Denver area all the freaking time. And so she worked in business management for 23 years and during that time at Arby's, and then finally she retired. And the position required literally commuting from Billings, Montana to Denver, Colorado.
Which for scale is what, like 11 hours or so?
Yeah, so it would probably be about 9 hours, I would say.
No, for those of us who stop occasionally and drive the speed limit.
Well, I know what you're thinking, and that is because of
it's 8 from here and 2 from there. Yeah.
Right. But if you're driving from Denver to Billings, typically, now Lisa's going to follow the road that you were thinking of, but for a different reason. But if you're driving from Denver to Billings, you're typically going to stay on the interstate all the way to Sheridan and then go over to Billings that way. And so it would be a little bit faster because it's interstate the whole way. Mm-hmm. So it's going to save you a couple hours probably. But yeah, it's a hell of a drive. I mean, it is literally all the way across the state of Wyoming, almost diagonally. So like the longest way across the state of Wyoming is...
Which isn't Texas by any means, but still long.
We're one of the larger states in the nation. Yeah. So it's a hell of a long ways across there. I don't know the exact mileage, but it's a long ways.
Do you want me to look up the mileage?
Can if you want to. But anyway, she literally commuted from Denver or from Billings to Denver, which is one hell of a commute. That might top out the commutes that I've heard of. But when we talk about commuting, she wasn't doing it every day, obviously.
Man.
And then after the whole tragedy, she wrote a book that's entitled The Murder of Lil Miss, a mother's brutal 16-year fight for justice. And that's all obviously about Lisa's case.
Yeah.
And then Lisa began working at Arby's part-time in Billings when she was 14. And so I would imagine that, she was a shoo-in for the job because her mom managed it. But from everything that I have learned about Lisa, she didn't take it for granted. And she wasn't like the spoiled kid, that she worked her butt off. And so that allowed her to then kind of move up through the ranks in this job. And so obviously Lisa's decision to work at Arby's was almost certainly influenced by her mom's role with Arby's, and not because it gave her benefits that other people wouldn't have, but I think more because Arby's treated her mom well and allowed her mom to work up through the ranks. And like I said, into senior management. And so I think that was kind of the plan for Lisa. She wanted to do the same thing, kind of follow in her mom's footsteps. Did you find the mileage?
Yes. The way that you were discussing is 555 miles.
Okay.
7 hours, 30 minutes, it claims.
Gotcha.
Ours is much longer.
Much longer. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's still a hell of a long ways to go. So, but her working at Arby's from the time that she was 14, but she probably graduated at 18. I didn't confirm that, but she had 4 years experience at that point. And so that kind of prepared her for future management roles. So, during her childhood, she balanced work with her studies at Billings Senior High School. Mm-hmm. And then, like I said a few minutes ago, she graduated in 1987. And when she graduated, she made the decision to really not to go to college. She made the decision to pursue a career similar to her mom's, and was at least going to put college on pause.
Right.
If the Arby's thing didn't work out, then maybe she would have changed her mind. But, I can completely understand that because everybody thinks like, oh, working in fast food, but her mom probably was making very good money as senior management at Arby's and probably had really great benefits. And it was probably a freaking great job.
And can we normalize that being okay? Because a job is a job.
Well,
You're paying your bills.
A job is a job. And I mean, I also, not to get off on too much here, but the fact that college somehow sets you up better is not true.
Sets you up for debt is what it does.
I mean, if you're going to be a brain surgeon, then yeah.
Yeah.
But
please go to college.
When I was teaching, I was teaching electrical, and every year was the same story. At least half of my class were college graduates that were getting into the electrical field because they couldn't make enough with their degree to pay off their student loans. So they had to go become electricians so that they could pay off the loans they had to take out to become underwater basket weavers or whatever nonsense they went to college for. And it is nonsense because
you pulled that out very quickly.
If you cannot make enough money to pay for the education you got, it is a worthless freaking
and you can't
degree.
Use the education.
Yeah, it's worthless. And so I actually encouraged my kids not to go to college unless they, well, I didn't really say that, but unless they had a definite goal that required college. Like I said, if you're gonna go be a brain surgeon, a heart surgeon, a doctor, whatever, I want you to go to college first. Kind of need to know a few things about that, but there's so many things that people do that don't require a college degree.
Yeah.
And, like Lisa's mom, I imagine she was making very good money, and Lisa would have, I'm sure, moved up through the ranks into management and then senior management roles with Arby's and probably would have made excellent money.
Yeah.
And so, so I think it's wonderful, and I think it's freaking smart for kids not to start off life with $200,000 or $300,000 in debt.
Doubt.
But so she saw that this role as a way to jumpstart her career into management, and so she utilized some of her money and savings and stuff that she had to support her move to Aurora, and then. I think it probably made it a little bit easier on Lisa and on her family that her mom was down there as well. So she was starting off on her own, but not entirely on her own. She didn't, it's not like she moved all the way to Aurora, Colorado to work the fryers at Arby's. She actually was beginning that process of moving up, and she was offered a position as a unit manager at an Arby's in Aurora. That's why she took it, because this was going to be her first real break into that management, and that was setting her up for the senior management, everything we just talked about. So her responsibilities would have been to manage the daily operations of the fast food location. And this is really the way that almost all franchise operations kind of start out with. You start out managing one store, and then maybe you manage 2 stores, and then maybe manage 3, and then maybe you do a region, it just kind of keeps growing from there. And so her work schedule was full-time by now, and it included the shifts ending in the afternoons or evenings. I couldn't find exactly, but typically the manager isn't at the location at midnight. You know what I mean? Yeah. She was probably working more of the day shift time period, and probably Monday through Friday. And then she would have had assistant managers that would have assisted with the other hours of the open.
But a manager's job is never done, and your phone rings constantly.
Oh, you're freaking telling me. Constantly. One of the main reasons that I gave up my general manager position was when I was sitting at my parents' table on Easter Sunday doing payroll. And I was like, this is insane. If I'm going to do this shit, I'm going to do it for my own business, not for somebody else's. But she took that role right after she graduated in 1987, and then she worked it up until the time that she disappeared in 88. And she was described consistently from all the way from the time she started at 14 all the way throughout as being hardworking and very dedicated. And it really fit her outgoing and fun personality. And so her mom and her decided that, I imagine that her mom already had an apartment in this complex in the Denver area. And then when Lisa made the move down there, she rented another apartment in the same complex. So she did not live with her mom. She had her own place. She was starting her own life. She was doing what so many fresh graduated 18-year-olds were doing. But, like a lot of kids are going to move across town from mom and dad. This gave her the opportunity to have mom close
to the support,
but still, start her life, be an adult, do her own thing, have her own place.
It's very cool.
It's really a neat thing. Yeah. And so they live close to each other, and I don't know exactly how large the complex was, but a lot of those apartment complexes in cities as large as Denver are big.
Cities on themselves, yeah.
You could live pretty privately in the same complex, because you might be clear. I mean, you could be 7-8 blocks away from each other, and so it's not like they were living across the hall, but I thought it was a really neat setup because it allowed mom to kind of keep an eye on daughter and, be available when she's like, baking her first cake or whatever. And it's like, this thing just exploded in my oven. What do I do? So
sounds like that's happened to you a time.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, when I first moved out, I attempted to I was broke like every young kid out on their own for their first time. And I didn't have dishwasher detergent. And so since clothing detergent looked the same, I figured it would operate the same, and I started my dishwasher, and I am not shitting you. Half of my kitchen was bubbles. Like it was probably 3 feet high all the way across the kitchen.
Yeah.
It's amazing how many bubbles come from laundry detergent.
Oh yeah.
In a dishwasher, and you cannot replace one with the other. Don't matter how they look.
Yeah, public service announcement.
But yeah, I mean, we all do dumb shit like that, and
you learn the lesson.
That's how we learn not to do dumb shit like that. But yeah,
that's what our 20s are for.
But so the way that the things operated was both mom and daughter would live the week in the Denver area. And then they would commute back up to Billings on the weekends. So they would usually leave the Denver area on Friday evening.
Dang.
And then they would be back to work by Monday morning. So it's tough. There is no way in hell I would do it.
I don't see any rest in there at all.
None. I mean, when I was living in Denver or in the Denver area, there's no way I would come home unless I had at least 4 days.
Yeah.
Because 2 days are taken up driving.
Yeah.
Because it's a solid 8 hours. And so it's not even worth it to come up for a weekend.
No.
That was my opinion anyway. But they did, for them it worked. And so that left Dad, Ron, at home with the younger siblings, sisters Sherry and Stacy, who were still going to school in Billings. And so I imagine that it was a situation that was bred from not wanting the kids to have to move schools.
Yeah.
And so mom was probably offered this position. And so the family probably talked about it. And I don't know this for sure, but I can almost guarantee that the conversation was like, well, we can do almost anything for a couple years or whatever. Cause I've had those. And then whatever the future looked like, I would imagine that probably Dad was going to move to the Denver area once all the kids were graduated, so it was probably a great opportunity for her to move into a senior management position, probably make a lot more money. And like so many of us do, you look at a situation and you're like, well, I couldn't do it for the rest of my life, but I can do it for a year. I could do it for 6 months or whatever the time.
Do we know what Dad did?
Dad was retired from the Marine Corps.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Hoorah. Okay.
Yeah. So, and I think it had to have been a really kind of a cool experience for both Mom and Lisa too, because it allowed them to
big bonding.
bond as mom and daughter, and from everything I understand, they had a great relationship anyway, but it is a special, unique thing when you have that one-on-one time with your parent, when you're not an only child and you get to be off with Mom or off with Dad, just the two of you, and with so many, I think with most kids, the dynamic changes once you graduate high school, and it should, and this happened with my kids too, is once you get out of high school, once you're out on your own, then you don't have the same parent-child relationship. You start building more of the friendship, and yes, you're always the parent, and yes, you're always there to give advice, but now's the time where we can be friends, because you're going to make your own damn decisions, whether I agree with them or not.
And I'm not responsible.
I'm not responsible. So let's just be friends.
Yeah.
So I imagine there was a lot of that, going on between there. And so, like you said, it was a hell of a freaking drive, 8 hours one way.
Yeah.
And they were typically leaving after work on Friday and driving all the way up there. And then, you would have to leave. Of course, I guess they didn't mind driving late, but if it was me, there's no way I'd be leaving later than noon on Sunday.
Yeah.
But maybe they were 2 or 3 in the afternoon when they took off, but they almost always just drove together. And, anytime you're researching this, you don't get all the little things. I'm sure there were times that Lisa was like, I'm not going home this weekend. I'm going to stay here.
Yeah.
And, other times
I need to sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But as a general rule, they would drive together and spend the time, chatting in the car and stuff like that, and then go spend the weekend at home with the family. And so it was a unique arrangement for sure, but I think it was a really kind of a cool and a special one, So I don't know. It started like 1,000 weekends before it, a plan, a conversation, a quiet compromise between mother and a daughter. Lisa's mom had a flight to catch. Normally, they'd be making the drive to Billings together, but this time, Lisa was going alone. She was old enough, responsible, she had the car, the routine memorized, and she had a boyfriend waiting at the other end. 7 hours, give or take, just her in the open road. And that day, the plan kicked into motion. Lisa said goodbye at work, told people where she was going, packed up the car, locked the door. She wasn't running away. She wasn't chasing anything. She was simply going to visit someone she loved. It was supposed to be a normal weekend, but we all know what's coming, and so did the road. So Lisa had a boyfriend, and it was a relatively new relationship with a guy by the name of Ed Jarosh, who lived in Cody. And Ed worked for Marathon Oil Company, which, being from Cody, I can tell you.
Say that name sounds very familiar to me.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna throw any first names out, but
People under the bus. Yeah.
I don't know for sure if he was related to the Jaroshes that we're thinking of or not, but I've wondered about that.
It's a pretty tricky last name not to be related.
Yeah. But anyway, he worked for Marathon. And for those of us that grew up in Cody, Marathon employed probably 3/4 of this freaking town at one time. I don't know if you remember as a kid, but
my grandfather was.
There was a time, all Marathon issued red trucks back then. And there was a time where it was like every other house in town had a red Marathon truck parked in front of it. The huge office building that was built here housed all of their offices. I mean, this was a major Marathon hub at one point.
I still have one of his hard hats.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I worked for Marathon as a private contractor. I worked as an electrician, privately contracted, but in Marathon's oil fields. So, I mean, at one time, they were huge here. And now they're not even here at all, which is kind of crazy. the big office building is now our library, and
It's still called the Marathon Building and will forever
it will always be the Marathon Building. Yep. So, but Ed and Lisa met. They'd been introduced by mutual friends, and apparently this friend was named Carla, and so they both were friends with Carla. So Carla kind of got them together, and they were doing the whole boyfriend girlfriend thing. Like I said, it was a relatively new relationship. Lisa viewed it as serious enough that she was going to introduce Ed to her parents for the first time that weekend. So the whole idea was, it was Easter weekend. So Easter was going to be, so it was March 25th was a Friday. So Easter was going to be the 27th. And the plan was she was going to take that longer route from Denver to Billings, like you had mentioned earlier. And she was going to leave Denver, drive to Cody, grab Ed, and I'm sure, stay and sleep in Cody. And then they were going to get up and drive on up and spend Easter weekend with her family in Billings. And this would have been the first time that Ed was going to meet her family. So, that's a big weekend in an early relationship like that, when
done over a holiday. Yeah.
Gone to the point where it's time to meet mom and dad. That's a pretty big deal. And, like I said earlier, her mom, Sheila, typically they drove together. And so, but this particular weekend, Sheila had a scheduled ski trip, which meant that she needed to be home earlier than she could if she was driving. And I didn't look for all the specifics of it and everything, but she did leave Denver on Thursday, March the 24th, and she decided to fly this time instead of drive because she needed to get home quicker. And then I'm sure that Lisa was like, well, that's fine because I need to go pick up Ed anyway. So, it makes perfect sense. And so mom took off on Thursday, and then Lisa was going to work and then drive up on Friday evening after she got off work, which would have been about 4:30 or something. Yeah. And so, the quick overview of the entire timeline is we've already talked about mom. She's gone. She got on a flight the night before. She took off. And then Lisa got off work in Aurora a little after 4:30 p.m. on Friday the 25th, and she took off. And then, so that would have taken her from Denver. She would have taken I-25 north up into Wyoming, from Cheyenne up into Casper. And then in Casper, she would have taken the big left turn, got off the interstate onto the godforsaken stretch of highway that's the longest in the world between Casper and Shoshone.
4 hours of nothing.
Which coincidentally goes right past Manita. So if you've been listening to any Rocky Mountain Reckoning episodes, you know about Manita. And so that would have taken her from, it's kind of funny because we've covered most all of these areas already on Rocky Mountain Reckoning. So I didn't plan this season to be like the geography of Wyoming season, but
hell, why not?
It kind of turned out that way. But so then she would have gone from Casper to Shoshone, and Shoshone, she would have turned to Thermopolis, and then Thermopolis turned to go up into Cody. So that's kind of the route that was planned, and it would have taken her plus.
Come on, man, you missed Matitsi, like it doesn't matter.
Well, I missed a lot. I missed Highland too. So I mean, what? Let me tell you every dot.
Yes, Dad blast it.
So that would have taken her roughly 8 hours or so, and she kind of had a little bit of a lead foot, which will come up in the story. So she probably maybe could have made it a little faster than that. But and nighttime driving, and she's by herself, and I don't know.
Jamming to music.
I don't know Lisa personally, but when I'm still this way, but when you're that age, a lot of the times you don't stop. You don't have to get out and go to the bathroom every 5 miles or whatever. You just drive until you get there. So you don't really stop unless you got to get gas. You stop, get gas. If you got to pee, you pee, back in the car, back on the road, you're out of there, So she could have made it a little bit faster than 8 hours, but right around that area. And then she was going to pick up Ed, spend the night at his home in Cody, and then continue on to Billings the next day for Easter with the family. Time didn't stop when Lisa went missing. It just got louder. The hours ticked by. First with quiet assumptions. Maybe she stopped for gas. Maybe she hit traffic. But as time went on, those maybes turned to worry. Lisa was supposed to call. She always did. Her mother waited by the phone, checked the clock, tried not to panic. But by the next morning, panic had settled in like a second skin. Calls went out, police were contacted. Once they found out that the boyfriend hadn't seen her, no one had. And then came the detail, the last confirmed sighting, a black Honda pulled over in Douglas, Wyoming. A girl matching Lisa's description at a First Interstate Bank drive-up ATM, quiet, controlled, and then gone. Reports were filed. Officers took it seriously, but out there in the fastness of Wyoming, serious isn't always fast. This was the moment that it all began to change. When Lisa Marie Kimmell went from a girl en route to a girl no one could find. So we know that she left Aurora, Colorado, sometime shortly after 4:30 and headed north. And then around 9 to 9:06, she was pulled over for speeding on I-25 somewhere near Douglas. And she had that interaction with the Wyoming Highway Patrol, and his name was Officer Al Lesko. And I've heard of this happening in other states, and I didn't realize that Wyoming did it, but I'm not surprised that they did either. And that is that if you get pulled over for a speeding ticket and you have out-of-state plates and an out-of-state license, they make you pay for the ticket before you can leave. And that's pretty commonplace. And that was the story that night when Lisa got pulled over. She got her ticket and he's like, and you have to pay this. And so she was like, I got no money. And so
follow me to an ATM.
Follow me to an ATM. Yep. And that's exactly what happened. He followed her to the ATM in Douglas. And then, but for whatever reason, she couldn't draw the cash. I don't know what the situation was, why the ATM wouldn't take her card. This was 1988. And I still run into this from time to time. But back then, I remember there was a ton of ATMs that would only take this card or these cards. Mm-hmm. You couldn't use your ATM at just anywhere. ATM, or you couldn't use your ATM card at just any ATM. And so it very well might have been that situation, but whatever it was, she couldn't pull the money. And so the cop was like, all right, well, I'm just going to let you go ahead and go. And he just mailed the money in, and I think that officers did then and probably still do have that discretion to be like, all right, well, I've probably tortured this. I probably tortured this poor girl long enough. She seems like a respectable young lady. I'm not going to worry too much about it. Certainly not taking her to jail, so.
Which maybe saved her life if he had.
Probably. Yeah, probably would have, but he had no way of knowing that.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I wasn't blaming.
Oh, I know you weren't, but you're absolutely right. I mean, it's too bad he didn't put her in jail because she'd be alive.
Yeah.
No doubt about that. And so shortly after that, shortly after 9:00, she bids farewell to Officer Al Lesko and continues her way north. And that was it. She disappeared sometime after that, but we don't know when. We still don't know when, but we do know that Ed was worried when she failed to arrive. And, we've all been in the situation that this poor guy was in, where you're sitting there waiting on somebody that's traveling and the hours are ticking by, and you always kind of have it in your mind, okay, well, I know it's this many hours, so I should expect her at this time. The time comes and goes, and then you're like, oh, maybe she got pulled over. Maybe it took a little bit of time. So then you wait another hour, and then, every hour you get a little bit more worried, a little bit more antsy, and pretty soon you run out of excuses to tell yourself, it's like, well, maybe there was bad storm. Well, maybe there, and then pretty soon you're like, okay, there's nothing that would have taken this long without a phone call.
Yeah.
Her car broke down. Okay, fine, but she should have called by now. So he ends up calling the family in Billings and being like, Lisa's still not here. And he was freaking the hell out. That had to be a very tough call to make because remember, he'd never met them.
Yeah.
So, but he did. I mean, he was a stand-up guy. He called mom and dad and was like, I'm really freaking worried about her. And then, so that would have been early Saturday morning, March the 26th. And so she was officially reported missing that same day. Mom and dad, they got on it and they reported her missing. And then from March 26th to March 31st, she was just gone. No contact, no sightings. And so obviously they're freaking the hell out. Every day that goes on gets worse and worse and worse. They continue to search, no results. And then on April 2nd, 1988, a body is discovered in the North Platte River near Casper. And it was a short time after that body was confirmed to be Lisa Marie Kimmell. And so from March 26th to April 2nd, there's this missing chunk of time where we don't know what's going on. She disappeared. Her body wasn't found until April 2nd. And when the body was found, it was very obvious that she had not been in that location that length of time. So she was found just off the government bridge in Casper. If you know where the government bridge is in Casper, it is not like a secluded, way out of the way spot. There's virtually no way a body could be laying near it for any length of time without being discovered because it's kind of in town. So, and then obviously the autopsy results and everything confirmed that she had not been dead very long when her body was found. And so, the investigation started and they confirmed that the last known sighting was in Douglas when she had that interaction with Trooper Al Lesko. And, it was a little bit longer stop than it maybe could have been because he had her go ahead and go to the ATM and attempt to draw the cash and everything. But he reported no anomalies. Lisa was alone. There was no other vehicles or persons involved. It was a very routine encounter with, the little thing with the extended payment attempt and the ATM card not taking her card and all that. That was a little bit of an outlier, but other than that, it was very routine. And the cop reported that there was nothing unusual at all about it. She didn't seem like she was under duress or anything like that. And so, the description that went out when she was missing, did you find something or?
I was just looking at the government bridge.
Oh, do you recognize it or? Yeah. Lisa was described as an 18-year-old white female, 5'3", 110 pounds. She had brown hair and eyes and was driving that black 1988 Honda CRX SI with Montana plate Lil Miss, LILMISS, which just exploded during this time.
Yeah, I bet.
I remember watching the news every night as a little guy, and they would have a Montana license plate on the little picture by the
picture. Yeah.
Yeah, it would pop up, and it was a Lil Miss, Montana Lil Miss license plate. It is just burned into my memory. I'll carry it with me my entire life, And the family actively reached out to the local media, both in Montana and in Wyoming, to spread awareness. I mean, they got busy right away, distributing flyers, doing interviews on the TV stations and all that, so Billings had 2 or 3 at that time. I can't remember for sure. I think they had 3. They had ABC, CBS, and NBC out of Billings. Casper had a TV station back then as well. I know that they were on all of those stations. I don't know. They probably were on, Cheyenne's as well. I mean, they were everywhere they could be. And this was a huge story. It blew up immediately because I, as an 11-year-old, knew about it before the body was found. I learned about it almost immediately when she went missing. And so I remember like the whole search and all, I remember the whole damn thing.
Yeah.
So it was huge.
I remember you telling the story that do homework, watch the news.
Yeah. Yep. It is so freaking true. So, you know, it was insane as a kid. It altered my reality for sure. So, but I think that that's a good place to close with the story. Like I said, there's no way to do this without doing multiple episodes. And so we'll dive back in on a lot of the specifics around finding her body and stuff in the next episode, but we'll close this one out here. So when someone disappears, time becomes something else entirely. It stretches, warps, breaks. Every hour Lisa was missing felt like a question without an answer. Her car didn't turn up. Her voice didn't return. Her bank account didn't move. And for her family, especially her mother, it was a kind of terror that wrapped around the chest and didn't let go. Lisa's mother called hospitals, called law enforcement, called friends. She stayed on the line until the silence felt like punishment, until someone finally said what she already knew. Lisa was missing, but missing isn't the same as lost. Not yet. In those early days, there was hope. Hope that maybe Lisa had pulled off the road. Hope that maybe she was with someone and just hadn't had a chance to call. Hope that she'd walk through the door, that the phone call would come, that the car would reappear. Search efforts began. Local law enforcement retraced known routes. Her photo was sent to agencies across state lines. But this wasn't Denver. This wasn't a city with cameras and foot traffic. This was wide open American West. And the distance between clues was measured in miles, not minutes. There was one real lead. A Wyoming Highway Patrolman remembered pulling over a black Honda CRX near Douglas. Another said that they thought they saw someone matching Lisa's description at a convenience store, and then nothing. This was just the beginning of a case that would cross jurisdictions, strain relationships, and haunt not just a family, but an entire community. It was no longer a late arrival, no longer a delay. It was a disappearance. And somewhere out there on those open roads under that vast Wyoming sky, Lisa Marie Kimmell was waiting to be found. She liked rainy days, not the cold kind, not the storms, but the kind where the clouds hang low and everything feels still, where the world softens just enough to breathe. Lisa Marie Kimmell was the kind of person who brought her own weather with her, warm when things got cold, clear-eyed when others looked away. She didn't need a spotlight. She made people feel seen just by standing beside them. She was 18 years old. She worked, held her own, managed her days with the kind of responsibility that made her family proud and surprised no one who knew her. Her car was more than just transportation. It was freedom. Black, polished, distinct. She drove it like she had somewhere worth getting to. And that's because she did. Lisa had dreams, big ones, future, a life that she hadn't even begun to sketch out fully, but that she believed in. And more than anything, she believed in people, that they'd do the right thing, that they'd look out for each other, that kindness wasn't weakness. That belief, that's what makes what happened to her so devastating, because Lisa wasn't naive. She just didn't live like the world was something to fear. And maybe she shouldn't have had to. We tell these stories not to reopen wounds, but to remind the world who was taken. Lisa wasn't a mystery. She was a daughter, a friend, a light, and she should be here. We remember her not just because of how she died, but because of how she lived. Lisa's story is just the beginning for some of you, but for her family, for the people who lived through it, it's never stopped. This is what this series is about. Not just remembering what happened, but honoring the people that it happened to.
Next episode, we'll walk you through the discovery that broke this case open. When Lisa was finally found, we'll also begin unpacking the evidence left behind and what it did and didn't tell investigators.
If this episode moved you, share it, post it, text it. These stories need light and your help to shine the light on it.
You can also support the show directly by joining our Patreon at patreon.com/darkdialoguepod or visiting coffee.com/darkdialogue. Your support fuels our investigations and keeps these cases in the public eye.
For deeper dives, episode transcripts, and bonus content, subscribe to our newsletter at Substack at darkdialoguecrime.substack.com.
And if you want to be part of the conversation, our Discord is open. Join us on Discord, share theories, talk about the case, or just be with others who care.
And I might also mention that there is now a forum feature on the website, so people can get in there and talk on the website as well. And there is also a link on our website to our Discord channel, so you can just see if anybody's on Discord by logging onto our website. And as always, you can always reach us at info@darkdialogue.com. We read every message.
And if you haven't already, like, follow, subscribe, wherever you're listening. It really does help keep these stories alive.
This has been Dark Dialogue, Rocky Mountain Reckoning. I'm John.
And I'm Angela.
We'll see you next time when the road leads deeper. Until then, stay safe, stay sharp, and make the guilty face the reckoning.